Hello, I'm Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. The purpose of this program is to connect you to contemporary issues, people, institutions, and organizations involved in the business of higher education in our nation and the world. Today, we'll be talking about a wide variety of higher education and admissions topics, from returning to college, to standardized testing, to appropriate levels of student debt. My guests are two well-known experts in the field of higher education. Joyce Smith is the CEO of the National Association for College Admission Counseling, a professional association of more than 11,000 college admissions and financial aid officials. Joyce has degrees in speech pathology and counseling services and has been a member of the Advisory Board for Scholarship America. Greg Grauman is the Director of Admissions at American University and a graduate of American as well. He oversees the recruitment and admission of the university's undergraduate students. He has worked at the American University of Rome, and before that, he taught about politics in Australia. Let's get right to it. Joyce, would you mind saying a word or two about what NACAC does and why it's important to students and to families?
It's interesting. Since our founding in 1937, our focus has been the same. We're concerned about students and families in the college transition process. And it's amazing, in our founding, it's based on how people are recruited. And today, we're addressing those same issues. That's what I feel our value is to the audience that's watching our program today.
Well, thank you for being here. And Greg, I know American University is a member of NACAC. You've been a member of NACAC for a long time.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, I guess I wanted to ask you, the first question, if I can ask you, Greg,
of course.
is what American University just made a big change in terms of the early decision process and allowing students to kind of not necessarily submit standardized tests. Mm-hmm. Would you mind saying a word or two about that, why you did it, and what happened?
Certainly. Last year, we implemented a pilot program in which any student applying early decision was not required to submit their standardized test scores. And the reason we limited it is we were looking for a small pool in which we could study. This year, we've expanded this pilot program, so any student who applies by November 1st will not be required to submit their standardized test scores for review of their application.
So if you were not a good test taker, then it would be to your advantage to apply earlier in the cycle to American?
I think it's an individual choice. Whether testing has never been a primary focus of our review. It's one of many things we look at. Mm-hmm. So an individual needs to look at their whole application and decide, is this something that they want to put forth or not?
Right. And did you get some opposition for this internally at the university? Was there some debate about this policy as this came about? It's
an ongoing conversation. I think it's important to stress it is a pilot, and certainly no policy decisions have been made. And so from the data that we get last year and what we will continue this year will be an ongoing campus conversation as to, is this something that fits for us to expand into a further policy.
Right. And Joyce, maybe if you wouldn't mind, first of all, just also thank you, Joyce. I've been a fan of yours for years, so thank you for being on the show.
Enjoying it.
So is this a national trend that we're seeing, more schools go test optional or modify test optional, and is there a NACAC policy about this?
I think it's so important to put into context the value of college admission testing. It's one of 3 or 4 primary measures colleges use to evaluate students. Grades in competitive courses, grade point average, rank in class, standardized tests, and writing samples are things that most colleges use. Of late, there have been a number of colleges mentioning becoming test optional, but many of them have also put into place procedures internally to provide more of a holistic review of student applications, where they have reading committees, writing samples, and a number of other variables to consider. But it helps educational institutions, scholarship programs, high schools evaluate students' college readiness. And whether you believe in standardized testing or not, whether it's the ACT, SAT, or advanced placement, they all serve a role in helping institutions like American University evaluate student applicants.
But what happens if I'm not a good tester and I take a number of tests and I just don't do well on them? I mean, what do I do? What's your recommendation for what I do?
Take that test. Don't avoid it. And I think that's the message that I'd love to make certain that your viewers hear. It's one piece of the puzzle. And I think if you have strong writing samples, if you've taken a rigorous course load in high school, those are all the factors, in addition to other things that might be important to specific institutions. Involvement in extracurricular activities, the depth and breadth of some type of program that you've been committed to. Those are all the factors that admissions officers use. So testing is one piece of that puzzle, but for many it's a vital piece. So, but don't be afraid of taking the test.
Fair enough. And if you don't mind me asking you, what are some of the things that NACAC's doing on a public policy level in terms of addressing things? Because I know you do a lot of lobbying on Capitol Hill. What are some of the big initiatives that you're working on right now?
I'm really excited to be head of this organization at a time when we have a president and administration supportive of education. President Obama has mentioned his goal for 2020 to try to encourage traditional and non-traditional students to graduate from college. And I hope that your listeners and readers understand the importance of the president being behind that initiative. NACAC has been a part of advocacy efforts called Pathways to College. We're looking for funding to support local counselors in schools for their training and support for counselors in schools. We also have been a part of supporting the DREAM Act. There are a number of undocumented students who've gone through their educational process and they reach senior year and suddenly they're not eligible for federal financial aid dollars. But we do believe those are students colleges will find important to have as a part of their student body. So we've been supporters of the DREAM Act. But mostly we've been encouraging our members and every citizen to get involved at the state level. We're going through such tough financial times at the state level, and that's where 93% of funding for a lot of our public institutions occur. In the last 2 years, high schools and colleges, public institutions have lost a lot of money. Right. And that's affecting programming. So I would just continue to encourage people to get involved and pay attention.
Well, there's been some controversy about the continuation of education policies of the Bush administration. Some people have said that Arne Duncan is basically Margaret Spelling's continuing in the Obama administration. Do you think that that's true?
I don't agree. I happen to really support a lot of the initiatives that Arne Duncan and the Department of Education are advancing. At the high school level, we want greater accountability in high schools. And I think what Spelling started with the No Child Left Behind has certainly fallen on tough times when you don't have financial support to support a lot of the needs of some of our large urban school districts. But creating a core curriculum that all states need to support, support for financial aid, those are all the things that I find valuable. And this administration, 9 times out of 10, I believe, hits the nail on the head.
All right. Well, thank you. And Greg,
yes.
So to follow up on some of these initiatives, I know that American just was cited, it was a few days ago, about your commitment to returning veterans. And I wasn't quite clear on what specifically you've been doing to encourage more veterans to come to American, and I was hoping that you might be able to say a word or two about that.
Certainly. We are part of the Yellow Ribbon campaign, and I think that's a prime commitment to veterans returning in terms of financial aid dollars. So I think that would be one as we're seen as a military-friendly school.
And and how many students do you have on in the pipeline right now who you think are going to be able to take advantage of this? I
don't actually know the numbers right now, but I know that all of the available dollars for the Yellow Ribbon were taken up in this past year.
Right. All right. Well, do you mind if I ask you one other slightly difficult question? I was doing some research for today, and one of the things that intrigued me was the endowment at American University. In 1994, the endowment of American University was $30 million. And as best as I can tell, the approximate value of it today is $390 million. That's a big change. Would you mind kind of sharing, one, how that happened, and two, whether or not more of those dollars are going into student scholarships for kids?
Sure. We remain largely a tuition-dependent institution. About 95% of our institutional spending is coming directly from tuition dollars. In that regard, have been in a very good position where other schools may have had to not be hiring new faculty and staff. We've actually been as we've been meeting our enrollment targets, have been able to continue to increase our budget and provide more both in scholarships as well as funding in other areas of the institution. So that's been a very much a strategic plan, is not to be relying on endowment dollars, but rather continue to rely on tuition dollars.
And that's the question I wanted to put to both of you. Perhaps maybe Joyce, you could address this on a national level. It seems to me that there's a controversy about these endowments, right? On one hand, universities claim that they need more endowment funds, right? Because it's a rainy day fund essentially. But then on the other hand, students are complaining that they're not getting enough financial aid. But meanwhile, so it's kind of funny here. So it looks like universities are having more money, but students are claiming they don't. So where's the disconnect on this?
I would caution us to consider how we view institutions' financial situations. 2008, a lot of educational institutions lost millions, if not billions. And the message or the takeaway piece, I think, for our audience is to have students ask about the ability to complete courses in 4 years, the availability of faculty and staff, what kinds of resources, buildings and grounds or capital kinds of projects like that, because that was no joke for a lot of the campuses. I'm pleased to say that mostly at large selective institutions where they had large endowments, they've preserved things like, if your income is $45,000 or less, you come tuition free. The Harvards, Princeton, Yales, and places like that. But people didn't have that kind of endowment. Most institutions did not. So I do believe, and I'm of a mind, that institutions do need to have a healthy reserve to be able to fund a lot of the things that are coming up in the years to come.
Sure.
But I'm with you in that we want to make certain they apply their resources to the best interests of the students. And my hope is that they'll keep the infrastructure of institutions strong so that students can be taught by professors, complete degree programs in 4 years, and have some reasonable resources available to them as students. My fear is that with that 2008 drop, that there was a lot of fear and a lot of cuts. And so I hope that we're turning the table and students are getting the benefit of institutions' strong endowments again as they build back up.
Great. And in terms of the debate that's going on right now about for-profit institutions, and if I understand this correctly, there's supposed to be a tie between kind of coming into the school and leaving the school or leaving the program. Do you think that's going to affect nonprofit institutions as well?
The work that's underway right now, I have to commend NACAC provided testimony on the Hill last week about the issue of the use of incentive compensation at for-profit institutions. And the concern that we've had all along is that often recruiters are sort of like throwing out a net, pulling kids in to get the financial aid. They help students fill out the forms, and suddenly, $150 million is going to a for-profit institution from grant money. What our take on this is that if the type of legislative activity that may be underway as a result of the testimony improves the situation for families, you don't have to feel that you're going through all of this, enrolling, and then not having the delivery of programming that you were promised, or that it's not what you thought and you dropped out. For our viewing audience, the message that I wrote down as people consider going back to college or going to college, period, is don't look for the quick fix. And if you're home during the day and you see 10,000 commercials, come here and get this degree in 2 years and you get a job, the promise of a job or of a career looks great. And a part of what worries me about the quick fix is that if students haven't done their homework, they might be involved in some for-profit institutions where the credits won't transfer, the certification doesn't mean anything at the state level, and that's the message about for-profits. I think the effort that's underway now to review the recruitment practices is going to improve everything all the way around.